Yeah.
part of, or before or after?
As supporting
Well,
information.
it makes sense.
5.3.
5.3. Okay.
Update. Yeah.
Okay. That's all I have.
The amended agenda.
On to item 2, we have an adoption of the minutes. Tim? Second. 3, I don't believe there are any public comments.
No public comments.
Okay. Item 4, business arising from the minutes. 4.1, Rural Transit Solutions Fund. Who is taking this one? Would have everyone in the room on the list.
In one of the rooms. So we have 2 counselors. We're talking about a design stream fund opportunities, and we have staff who will be able to update you on capital projects stream for that fund.
I much to update. We applied for the capital stream of multi-use path. Rapidly, haven't heard anything. That's probably not a good sign, but also these federal programs. So, you know, success or not of that.
Tim, did you have anything on this topic?
Well, Judy and I have been talking about it.
The Rural Transit Solutions Fund has 2 branches, and one of which is capital and the other one is planning. So the capital is a much larger fund, but it also has a deadline, I think, of February the 28th. And the planning one is wide open. It has never had a deadline yet. So they have a little caveat at the end of their page saying that that might change, but at this point it's open. So it's funding up to $50,000. And by planning, they mean, are you going to engage in public engagement, a needs assessment, feasibility surveys, or an assessment of the routes or the mode of transportation? So, and it is, we're eligible as a municipality. And if Bowen Transit or one of the similar group were a registered company, they could come in as partners. And
I mean, Transportation Society.
yes, or any other group. So when I noticed in your letter from Translate that staff didn't think that they were eligible, and I don't think they are either, in terms of it's limited in terms of who's assessment. So they need to have some description of anybody that you're partnering with, the nature of the project, the current level of access, whether or not you're going to have public consultation, the different groups that will benefit from an improvement, such as, and in our case, I think it's going to be youth, disability, seniors, women, and people experiencing poverty. We don't have, there seems to be a lot of 4 or 5 sections that had to do with Indigenous groups, and I don't think that we've got that kind of representation at this point on Bowen. So if there's other people that will support it financially or I guess philosophically, then we need to organize getting letters from them. They need to have in the application some description of how this planning would support development of a proposal for future services. If there's a municipal plan in terms of the transit plan, and I have some questions about that because the website, the Bowen website seems to be incomplete. And if there is a plan, then they want to highlight the specific challenges and how will this proposal help with those challenges? How will we share it with the community and what is the management plan? So it can't be a total federal funded project, and I can't find whether or not there's in-kind contributions to it. But if there's other contributors, then they need to know that that is secured funding. So, but a letter of intention would, seems to suffice. In order to be accepted, the funding, they must be able to demonstrate that the funding has been secured. So, I'm not sure. I guess my question for Drew would be, whether or not there's staff time, for the proposal. And if that's possible, whether it's realistic to expect that the present staff component could do this, or we're asking for funding for staffing. I would think the latter. But if that appears to be possible, then I think my recommendation would be that we recommend to council that we ask staff to put in a proposal.
I'm not total, what is the proposal for?
To get some planning to figure out how to, for me, I would like to see some focus on transit on Bowen. So improve transits along the lines of what's in some of the options that Transit are suggesting, but getting people out of cars and getting fewer cars onto the ferry and just figuring out, how we get people on the south side and Mount Gardner and some of these other maybe after hours and what we've got now. So just improve services for public transit and get more people using it.
Yeah, I have a comment. And did you have?
Yeah, so we do have the transportation plans that we were referring to on the website. We have the 2018 to 2038 transportation plan. And it talks definitely about transit improvements and some of the things you're speaking to. And as far as TransLink participating, I think we would be relying on TransLink for the capital funding for the rolling stock. That's what we do now, is they supply it. And so I thought in the application, we in fact would be showing TransLink as a partner. Because they would be involved as well with the design. And my thought after meeting with them and reading the letter that came back is I think we should pick one thing and go for it. And I think that thing is basically the extension or the follow-up on the pilot program with the on-demand app.
This is a grant, $50,000 for planning though, right?
Right.
So all we would get out of that is a plan to execute the tracking?
Well, so one of the things the plan was for, I don't think we need a needs assessment and that kind of thing, but we maybe a feasibility study is what we want. And I don't know that it needs to cost $50,000. I just want to get the ball rolling as Judy does. So yeah, I think so. I guess the first question is can we do that, and do we have the capacity to complete the application?
I mean, one thought I had for a planning topic is essentially we have one both a narrow and very general problem in the summer or peak travel where our ferry system crumbles, and we have at peak time no ability to access the service. You can't just drive your ferry on if we're having a summer surge of traffic, whether that's on a weekend or a weekday. So you can't go access services. So it affects everybody, both through a lack of physical capacity of the cars, but also in the fact that they can't keep the schedule. So if you're trying to connect the TransLink, it doesn't work. And that throws our system further out of whack, and that all the buses are aligned to the ferry, which the tracking is part of a solution. But we don't actually have a clear path forward as to how we solve this. BC Ferries doesn't intend to get a bigger vessel because of uncertainty with growth, with limitations on carbon emissions and capital expenditure for peak travel. So I thought that one topic that could be an option is, I don't know if it would fall under the needs assessment, but trying to map out what direction we should move to solve this breakdown of services, whether we should abandon, one possible outcome would be you need to change up how you move people into the city, move them away from cars and move them in a fashion that better integrates with the now fairly good transit on the other side. The 257 is running at 15 minutes. So if you could leave Bowen on foot and get to that 257, you've got pretty good access to the region, which I think is part of like regional access or access between regions is part of this scope. So maybe the outcome is that the peak travel shouldn't be aligned with the ferry. Like our shuttle bus just running more frequently to a water taxi might be an outcome of a needs assessment that does encourage people away from cars. And I thought if we could come up with a pointed explanation of what the problem is and apply for money for somebody to solve, or at least come up with a path to solve that problem, it might be useful. That's kind of like a very specific but very general planning need that we don't really have anyone tackling, because our transportation plan ends at the ferry. BC Ferry's plan only deals with the car ferry crossing the strait, and TransLink is focused on the bus on the other side. Well, the bus on the other side now exists. I don't see BC Ferries changing. So working within those constraints, like some sort of road, some sort of path forward for us to pursue, I think would be helpful.
I think that kind of aligns with there's two parts. We need to get people to whatever is taking them across the water. And once they're there, there's the 257. And as you say, that service is good. So we still need something better than our existing bus system tied to the Queen of Capilano for getting people to the cove. So it could be a combined.
It's $50,000. If that's consultant time, it's going to be eaten up fairly quickly if you get into a really nebulous ask. I think that the feasibility for actually implementing the tracking might work, but if the operator is still not local, we would really need the operator, I think, to implement the tracking.
The tracking, you mean using the app?
GPS or the app,
Yeah.
I don't know how much control we have over that. The value I see in having a plan for an overall solution is it would help communicate a need, both to BC Ferries, TransLink, province, about, maybe Bowen does need a passenger ferry that just runs in the summer to get this foot traffic off the ferry, to stop the passenger overloads. And then our shuttle system needs to adapt to that service existing. Like maybe this bigger plan could help steer us in a direction that actually achieves change, instead of us starting off with what we think the solution is and trying to piecemeal at it that way. Because that is something we're all kind of working at. Whenever we see room for improvement, we go and poke and push and try and get these incremental steps. But without a big plan, we're kind of shooting in the dark, because if one part goes ahead, it doesn't work on its own. Like if you get the tracking app, but we still are tied to the ferry, it's a little bit better, because at least when the ferry is an hour and a half late, you can see where the bus is and you can plan your day a little bit better. But we haven't solved like the whole issue. We've just made like one little step. But I guess my vote would be to focus on using planning money to try and tackle the big unknown, which is like, how do we fix the fundamental breakdown of the system, which really occurs in peak traffic. Like most of the year, you can show up to the ferry and you can get on the ferry. Well, it's not even all that true anymore, because we did have a lot of overloads this year, just through the 9 through 11 a.m. kind of thing. But anyway, if we could come up with, direction we were all trying to move in, that was well thought out and well presented, that might help everything move at once.
Well, I'm not sure how detailed we need to get in the application. I don't see, our little idea generation here, which is what we're doing. I mean, it's fine, high level and conceptually, but we need a lot more specifics. And I thought that's what the application's for, to do the planning, and the group doing the planning. I mean, maybe some of us are going to be part of that group, but we really need to have consultants.
Sure, but I thought you were specifically asking about a tracking app and the shuttle.
But I agree with you. So it's not like that's one little part. I think there's two parts here. One is the tracking app, the shuttle, and people getting more options to get people to the cove, and then water taxi or passenger ferry across. And the big question is, do we have enough traffic to sustain that when we're not at peak times? And so, I mean, there's a lot of questions here that I don't think we're going to answer just chatting around the table.
So in terms of this funding being available, then, and I think this is part of the problem in terms of everybody has great ideas and everybody wants to try and figure out a solution, at least in terms of the congestion in the cove, whether that's this side or the other side. So I think my impression is that we want to get some help doing this. I don't think that we've got the capacity in terms of our planning department. And, if the fund's available, then I think we need to at least take the first step and find out whether or not it's feasible to even come up with an application form. And how do we do that, right? And figure out whether or not, if there's a local contribution to it, whether or not that's going to be possible. And, just look at some of the details. But I think we should try for this somehow, take the first baby steps at this point and figure out. I think there's some administrative things that we have to clarify, first of all, in terms of both the capacity of the planning department and what the financial contributions are. But beyond that, I think that it's something that we have skirted around and, wanted to do. I haven't been able to find that on the transportation plan, but I know it was mentioned in the active transportation plan that there should be more on transit. So, it's like it exists, the funding exists. I think we can get some help from it. I think we can make an application that would fit, that would be successful. And I think that would help the planning department, not put it all on them, which I don't think is going to be a high priority. It's a high priority in our strategic planning, but I'm not sure that we've got the staffing for it at this point.
John?
Thanks. I'm inclined to agree with Tyler that the more detail, the more specific we are in terms of what we're trying to achieve when we're applying for money, the better chance we are to make good use of it. And just in this conversation, we identified, or there were identified, two things, which, while related, which one of these are we really trying to solve? One was congestion in the cove, and the other was getting people to the cove. I heard both of those as these are things we really need to, these are things that we'd be our time would be well spent planning, spending the planning money on doing this. But the more we spread it out, those are, while they are related because they're about traffic, there are different solutions to them as well, and different plans in my mind would probably be necessary. So I think we want to apply for whatever grants and funding we can get, but the more focused we are on what exactly it is we're trying to achieve, I think that would serve us well to get that way.
Yeah, I don't think I made my point clear by providing an example of a possible outcome. My goal was for us to not put out our proposed outcome into this request at all and simply identify the need for planning. So if in my scenario, we wouldn't talk about water taxis or connections or frequency or anything. That's a possible outcome of the planning. The ask would be that we need to figure out how to connect people to Vancouver during peak traffic when our current system breaks down. And it would be like, here are the problems. We can't get on the ferry with a car. You can't catch the bus because it doesn't run on time. Nothing connects with a high enough frequency to make use of the 257, just like a list of, like a problem statement that outlines what's wrong. And then we ask somebody else to come up with a plan. How should we move forward to fix this problem?
So to Judy's question, then, what would, how much onus would there be on staff? Like, and the question was, can staff handle some of this, or do we outsource to a consultant and, you know, for the whole thing or for part of it, or, and when we do that, we're certainly going to want to be specific at that point. Assuming we have the money.
Somebody needs to put what a request for proposals would be, the scope of services that we're looking for. Often these grant programs, if you have a fee proposal from a consultant as your cost estimate, that's what then they know what they're funding. Much better position to. For one thing, you've defined what it is you're looking for, because you've defined the scope of services, and you've also gotten a fee proposal from a consultant that lets the grant administrators know how much money you need, and us know how much money we need. Somebody, that's where the staff time is going to come in, is putting that together.
So don't we have a step before that, though, in terms of whether or not this is something that council would agree to, and that we can try to figure out whether or not staff have time to help organize that?
Yes.
So I think the recommendation from this committee has to be that this funding is available, that we'd like to get the administration, get the CAO, I suppose, to decide whether or not it can fit in the work plan.
So the recommendation is simply to pursue the funding
I think at this point,
for planning purposes.
and see whether or not there's support for that, and then you know, we can elaborate on all the possibilities, but in terms of whether or not it's island specific, or it's, you know, connecting to the region, or, you know, how much we want to get into how this branches out, but you know, that I think has to be narrowed down and be more specific in terms of what we're actually looking for once we get to the point of putting this together.
I'm in favor of that part.
It's a baby step, but I think it's essential.
And I think what you said, Tyler, about putting out the problem, not the solution, not the outcome. We've got, you just outlined the problem quite well. And the other piece that I see happening here is I can't see this planning getting done without TransLink being involved. It's bring them into the conversation. And I think having them on board in the ways that they talk about this letter would strengthen their application. And maybe they could help with the application.
Isn't that part of the next step? No one wants to start getting into an RFP and who we want to partner with and how to fill in some of these blanks. And, you know, the best fit, and, you know, whether or not it's going to be Bowen Transportation and TransLink and, you know, whatever.
As council members, when you ask council for something general, like, can you direct staff to apply for this money for this purpose? Do you think that these bullets that you're talking about would help council understand what the scope of work is being asked of staff?
Like, what do you mean by?
Like, I'm just putting out, I think we've narrowed it down just to basic, council direct staff to apply to the planning design stream. Is that where we've left it at? A recommendation? You, just to do that first step.
I'm feeling like the ask at this point is, do we have the capacity to take on another grant? Right? So, there's a lot on the docket. And, this would be very helpful and it would be one of my priorities and it is in the strategic plan. But I think step one is, can we move this, can we go in this direction? And then if they say yes, and whether that has to be council or not, then it's like, I think we have to have another discussion in terms of us narrowing down what the focus is going to be. And who's going to be involved and involve, the staff at that point in terms of who's going to be helping to write this.
So the first ask is it okay if we head this way? Is there staff availability for us to head this way?
I know that when we were doing the strategic planning, it's like 3/4 of everything was the planning department, right? And I've lost track in terms of whether or not they were getting help and hiring people or, whether or not we're still in a situation where we're short staffed. So I think that's the first question. Is this even possible? It's a great idea, but.
We have
I just have a basic,
words.
yeah, I guess that's what I'm saying is I'm not sure from what I have that they know how much
Well,
staff.
no, I
we're
don't think
asking
this
for.
is what
Yeah.
Judy's saying.
So what do you want? Let's work on it.
How do we ask council things? Is that we make recommendations on topics? Do we have asks of council? We ask council to,
Can you see that, Judy?
No. So when you're applying for the multi-use path under the active transportation plan and everything, what are the steps that set that up?
Well, we need to have a project, we need to have a scope, and that's why I was saying that we need to outline what is the scope of work, what are the scope of services that we would be
Yeah.
hiring a consultant to do.
Before that though, before we get to an RFP.
Well,
That's
that's,
a really good idea
but that is, I mean, you have to put some parameters around, well, what is the project look like? What are the tasks that we're looking to accomplish with this money? Otherwise, you're just talking about ideas, which are important. But those ideas need to be framed into a particular scope of services and maybe it's going to be partly handled by staff, but in large part, here's what we want to hire a consultant to do for us. And this is how much we think it's going to cost. I don't know, I haven't read through this portion of the grant guide. The one for the capital stream required Class C cost estimates. So you had to have at least a schematic design showing what is the project that you're applying for. So I presume they want something similar for this stream, where you have to outline, here's the project that we're seeking funding for, and this is how much money we need. So and that's something that's going to require some staff time. That's what's going to require the staff time to figure out. So it kind of is the next step.
Okay.
Is that always like planning and capital the same that way generally? Grant?
Well, we have to.
Drew, can you speak to the planning stream at all?
So you're just asking about our capacity in this department? So
The
you're asking about,
approach to the grant, I guess. The way that Patrick's framed the steps that would be involved with a grant application, are those similar to what would be involved for the planning piece?
sorry, yeah, I don't really have any past experience with grant applications, so I couldn't really confirm that.
Okay.
Okay.
So,
We have applied, we have gotten grant funding for transportation planning.
Mhm.
And it was related to the multi-use path. And when we applied for it, it was a different program than this. But when we applied for it, we actually had a fee proposal from a consultant. And we submitted that along with the grant application, seeking funding of that amount based on, here's the scope of work that we intend to do. This is what the consultant.
And we had a planner that was a transportation expert. Had a lot of training in that, so, you know, she did a lot of work behind the scenes. Or, you know, at the beginning in terms of setting stuff up and figuring out the consultants and everything, so. Why don't we table this and I will have an informal conversation then with Liam and possibly Daniel and just find out whether or not it's even the feasibility for the feasibility study is at all feasible.
Yeah, I'm good with tabling it. I also think we could, as a group or even a subgroup, develop our idea a little bit so that we're not just asking a big question for resources to plan the planning. Like if we actually just, I think that if we start pulling in partners everywhere, we're starting to get away from this idea of a general ask. Like the moment you pull in BTS, you're now planning a bus. And the moment you pull in BC Ferries, you're now planning on a ferry. Like whatever partner you start off the ask with is going to frame the direction you're going. The asks might just be like, what direction do we need to go? But I think I'm second tabling this until we've developed it a bit further.
So what I will do is share, I was able to find the step-by-step questions for this frequently asked questions or whatever the section was. It was hard to find at first, and I contacted somebody in Ottawa today to figure that out. So I have that and I was reading through that, so I can share that just by way of more information about this particular grant. It's quite a bit looser than the actual capital one.
Any other comments?
Just that I do think we need to do more than say we need money to do design. I think identifying the problem that we're trying to solve.
Okay, that sounds like agreement.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Item 5, I've got one staff update. Did you have anything, Patrick?
Not really. I haven't been involved in transportation work other than the multi-use path, and we're getting close to being in a position to tender the next phase, which would take us up to Charlie's Lane. Taking quite a while to get there, but we ran into some geotechnical challenges, some property acquisition challenges, and then some redesign to solve those. So we're getting close to moving now. Yeah, we had also talked about the need for advancing, so doing some advanced design work for other parts of that project, so that we're in a position to apply for grants when they arise. We've got these BC transportation grants, which is essentially $500,000 per year that could be applied for. They all require some level of design and cost estimates for the submissions for the applications. So that's something that we need to advance, and we haven't got a lot of budget to do that this year beyond the immediate next step and advancing that next piece of the multi-use path. Something that we definitely need to be devoting some staff time to and some budget to in future years.
Is there any plan for markings currently in the first section of trail off the ferry?
Not currently. Is there a sense that we need to have a center line marked on them?
No, my observation is that when we get like bikes coming over for tourism,
Oh, I see.
they're not going on to that first section of path, like they're riding up the road in the middle of the unloading ferry traffic. And my recent thought is that a simple bike marking at the entrance might divert that traffic. Because they're riding off a ferry into a fairly complicated intersection, and I think they're not cluing in that they can ride on that shoulder until after the main intersection at the top of halfway up the hill.
Yeah, well, that's a good point, and that's something relatively small that we could do that might make it significant.
Does anybody else agree with that?
Definitely.
Yeah,
How might be a signpost or pavement markings or both?
I would think of pavement marking, just like a bike or a shared path symbol on the surface there might be the most visible. I'm just thinking of the mindset they're in coming off. They're moving fairly quickly. They're probably not going to read a modest size sign amongst other stuff, and it might not even like a couple on the length of it, because there's a few areas they could enter. Like there's the crosswalks where you could get onto that curb.
It's hard for them to get over onto the shoulder right off the road, so they do use that lane. But then once they get to the intersection in front of the library, so there's a bike with an arrow, it's like, come over this way.
Yeah, this is a shame to watch somebody riding up the hill at 5 kilometers an hour with chaos around them when we've got this beautiful bike lane or the multi-use path.
I would think pavement markings at strategic spots and maybe a sign too, just where they have to, with a big arrow, basically saying bikes.
Have you noticed whether the bike riders go up top when they're coming across the sound?
You mean up top, up on the ferry?
Yeah, so they would read a sign up there?
I think they're used to bike lane markings. I think they would notice something on that path. And I think trying to decide whether, like often you're cold, if you're sweaty, you might not go up top.
You might be looking for it too. Yeah, I got something.
Yeah. That the Transportation Advisory Committee recommend that council direct staff to install signage and or paint pavement markings to indicate that cyclists may use the multi-use path after disembarking from the ferry rather than riding up the center of the road. Rather than riding on the road would probably be
Yeah.
Should we put the embarkation point, in other words, in front of the library or at Cardina?
Well, I think staff's on board.
Yeah.
I think,
Agree.
I know you agree. I just can't have them telling you what to do.
I know, but my point was going to be to leave it
Yeah.
vague, to use their very good judgment to figure out where the signs need to be, not start making directions.
I'd remove center of the road, just riding on the road seems to be enough to me.
Riding on the busy, chaotic,
It is,
disastrous road.
it is for 5 minutes.
Yeah. During rush minute.
Yeah,
Yep, I like it. Do you want to
One
move?
center.
do I move it? Is that I've
Sure.
lost all my language for this meeting.
You can move it.
I'll move it.
I'll second.
Any discussion?
I'll vote yes.
I think we can vote if we're all on board.
I
See John. Okay.
Done.
It's the right unanimous again.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever spelled it right once.
So anything else, Patrick, for staff updates or?
Not really. I don't know if it, wasn't involved in the latest steps with the transportation plan.
Oh, Drew, I didn't have Drew's name, but he's here.
It's here.
But, yeah, that thing from the last minutes. The consultant didn't want to do 25 pages of rough notes.
Yeah.
What happened with that?
All that hard work.
Sorry, are you guys speaking to me?
Judy's asking about the
Okay.
active transportation plan, the consultant's reaction to all the copious amount of notes.
Okay, sure. Yeah, sorry, the sound kind of wasn't great there for a second. Still working there that down. And to be honest, I've just been away on holidays for most of the time since our last meeting. I just got back last week, so yeah, I don't have much to. I'll just be meeting with Daniel and Patrick soon to go over what I've narrowed down and make sure they agree on, putting that direction to the consultants.
Okay. Will that come to this group again, or?
Yeah.
I think that was the plan. Yeah.
Okay, so probably maybe by next meeting, do you think?
That's only in 3 weeks or something.
Oh,
Just thought I'd warn you.
yeah. Good point. Might be a tall order. Yeah.
Okay, anything else? Are we good with 5.1? Okay, 5.2 is Ferry Advisory Committee update, which is me. A couple of items here. The ferry poster board process, which has been happening a little bit by email. I don't know if there's been some discussion about who does what.
What the heck? Maybe Judy would have some insight, actually.
Sorry?
Jamie Shepper sent a note saying that there was something about the Art Council and a board, and I was confused. And she took it down. And then Tyler got some information from someone. And then we just sort of thought it was the road less traveled for Tyler just to do it all. That always seems to be the way. And then we thought, well, the Arts Council must have had some reason for wanting an arts board, and maybe it's part of the cultural master plan and promoting arts and so I just sort of replied that to Jamie, who spoke to Jackie Massey in East Vancouver, and I don't know where it's landing now, or.
The way I plan to proceed is
Oh.
if I see an arts poster in the box, I'm gonna put it on the arts board.
Okay.
And I don't really want another procedure. If somebody else wants to take control and they want to do that, then that's fine. It seems like it was very clearly laid out at some point where I've forgotten her name now.
Jackie Massey.
Jack, was that the name on the
Yeah.
contact? Okay, so Jackie was listed there. It's clearly the right phone number. They were clearly calling it for the right purpose. It's just people got disconnected from the way things were running. But it all goes in one box. And if I pick up the box, I'll just put it on the other board. So if everyone's okay with that, we'll continue.
So when I'm very rarely on the boat, but when I'm there and I'm just sort of wandering around to see if there's anybody to talk to and whatever, and I'll say to the staff, is there anything in the box? And I'll put it up, right? So that it's.
There you go, you're not alone.
Yeah,
Is that a hassle?
it's not a hassle, but I think for 2 or 3 weeks in a row, I must have been the day behind you or the same day. And they'd be like, some lady just did it. And they ratted you out and gave me a description and everything. Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
But it's fine because sometimes I miss it and there's no harm if they tell me it's up. I think the only place we might fall apart is I've not been writing the dates on the paper as I put them up, and I just take a picture with my cell phone and use that to figure out what's been up there. So we might, like for once, it's full right now, like it's completely chock-a-block full. So we might have a bit of a breakdown if we're both doing it, but we also have a breakdown if I forget for 3 weeks, so I think it's fine if you wanna jump in there.
I know that there was a theater thing coming up that was they put the poster in the box late. And it was like, it was gonna be over too soon kind of thing. So I was like, oh, let me just do it.
Yeah.
So I had a kid come up and say, I'd love to help.
Aww.
Candy go.
We've, you also forwarded the letter from the commissioner, talking about a bit of a breakdown in communication with BC Ferries. I don't want to spend too much time on that because I think some of it's just people complaining, and communication's never been that great, so it's not really news. But I think her recommendations were largely kind of in line with our last conversation. They do have a terms of reference for Ferry Advisory Committee members now. I think we may have had that in the minutes or emailed it out last time. The action item list that's mentioned in that letter from the commissioner, I've now gone over that with BC Ferries and pulled out a lot of the simple or not impactful topics such as washroom cleanliness and regular stuff they should be doing, and have a pared down list that they're going to carry forward to public engagement within the next month. I'm happy to share that or go over it. I probably can't share it until it's approved by them, but happy to share that when it is. Part of that conversation was the Bowen Island Municipality, what do we call it? The travel guide? You called it the do's and don'ts, but it has a different title at the top.
Ferry guide,
The ferry guide?
I think so.
So that had been an ask for quite a while, that BC Ferries help distribute that either to people who need it at the booth or on the ferry. And the last meeting in the fall or the summer, it was a no due to their print materials policy, but they've since gone back on that and are going to help us spread the word of how to enter the ferry lineup. Other notable topics.
Oh, sorry, Bowen Ferry Guide.
Bowen Ferry Guide, okay. There's never been movement on the idea of a passenger water taxi with BC Ferries. It's just been seen as being out of their service mandate. The one angle that I've landed on recently with the passenger overloads is that they don't have a terminal on this side and they can't control who comes first. Like on the other side, it's whoever comes first and buys a ticket gets to get board the vessel. So if it fills up with cars first, they get on, and if it fills up with passengers first, they get on. And at least there's some equity in that system and that it's first come, first served. On Bowen, they can't control the crowd. So the passengers are going to load before the cars just out of safety and feasibility. So when they get a passenger overload, they don't have a lot of tools to deal with that. So on that angle, I've been pushing for maybe it's time to hire a water taxi when you're hitting those peak walk-on traffic. And even if it's some sort of emergency situation that they can instigate when they start seeing these passenger numbers hit the limit. That's kind of an angle I'm taking with them on passenger vessels. So whether it goes anywhere or not, I'm not sure. Medically assured loading is on there, not that updated them that the process has been sorted on Bowen, but also that people are reporting that it's still not working on their end. So that'll be carried forward. And then a lot of regular topics remain. Service notice improvements, current conditions not working, summer traffic concerns, and on-time performance being the big ones. Unless there's any questions?
I'm just wondering like that. So that's a great idea. We seem to have all these ideas, but we don't have any means of sort of moving them forward and having some decisions made. It's not council making the decisions. It's not BC Ferries. It's not TransLink. I feel like we need a process to address, and maybe the planning is the hub where we do this. But we need to find a way to actually get things done rather than just float ideas.
Yeah, I agree. I think, the thing I keep barking at everyone who will listen is that no one is looking at our overall plan for how to move us across the water, because we've got distinct bodies on both sides and one in the middle. So I agree that the planning could be a great package to at least have a professional identify or take our identified problems, put some information behind it, and then you could maybe get some buy-in from somebody who can make decisions, like the province or province. If crossing the water was something that was going to change and BC Ferries was involved, the province would need to be involved, Ministry of Transportation. And in order to have that conversation, I think you need that document. So I agree.
Because we're hitting a capacity conflict between passengers and cars. And on that side, as I understand it, they just keep selling to passengers. And if they get to a certain point, then they start limiting cars.
No, they sell tickets both to cars, people in cars, and passengers. And when the vessel hits the limit, everyone's cut off. Is how they've said their policy goes.
Phil, I've heard there have been situations where they won't let, even though more cars are there with tickets, they won't let them on because they've got too many passengers.
Well, they've denied that. Whether, is that something you've heard with good data or Facebook complaints?
Well, not Facebook, so conversation, but I've heard it numerous times. And maybe it's the same source, I don't know, but just the fact that we don't really have a clear understanding of how that works.
No, I do have a clear understanding of how it's supposed to work. I mean, I've been over this many times with BC Ferries, and they're monitoring the ticket count as a whole, like how many passengers are going on this vessel. And the moment it hits 423 or whatever the current ticket, then they're stopped.
They both stop.
They both stop.
Okay, so in that case, if the passengers have come on ahead of the cars or like come into the ticket booth ahead of the cars,
Yeah.
then that's when we don't have a full load.
Yeah, and there's really no way for an individual to know with certainty that this is happening, because if you're driving on and you get cut off, you're only like how would one individual piece this together that this wasn't happening this way? Like, you have your perspective. If you drive down and you got cut off due to passenger count, it's likely going to be walk-ons because it only holds 100 cars. So every car would have to be full in order to fully max it out with passengers.
What you're saying makes total sense. I've never heard that explanation. So I mean, we gotta get that out there.
Trying. Yeah, I don't know. It's
We'll sell tickets for this recording. You too. Minute for it.
I don't know how to get it out there, write it down. Is that like a little tidbit? Traffic tips or
one
ferry tidbits.
thought is to start having, like, people don't really come, they don't attend the BC Ferries engagements events in very high numbers. And if they do, it's normally to complain about a specific thing. One thought is to open up a public conversation without BC Ferries with the Ferry Advisory Committee in between meetings or in preparation for meetings where the public can come and discuss. And in order to handle that, my thought would be I'd have to explain a bunch of these things, like a Cole's Notes version of all the discussions that have happened over the last few years. So if I ever get around to that, then that could be something that could exist for people to reference when it comes to these topics, just like a standing.
Tyler's tidbits.
Yeah. Something catchy, but some sort of standing explanation of what the situation is.
So we've got explanations of the challenges with the ferry lineup on this side and all the what to do's. There's something on the website about that. At times there are notices in the newsletter goes out from the municipality. I mean, I think we could get that out in all those areas where you get ferry information. I think that explanation should be in there.
Yeah.
So get council direct staff to ask the communications department to make a.
Well, it should probably go the other way around. I should pass along a request to BC Ferries that explanation be formally given by them and then spread by municipality. Does
Okay.
that make
Let them
sense?
do the work. Yeah.
Let them do the work, yeah.
I can put that as an action item for you.
Yeah,
Ask BC Ferries for a written explanation of the ticket cutoff in Horseshoe Bay Terminal.
yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else?
So the flip side of that, what happens here when there's a ton of passengers down there and they all walk on, then they limit the number of cars.
So yeah, then they have a guy with a clicker who's counting both, he counts the walk-ons and he estimates the people by looking in the window. So he's trying to count them. And when that hits the limit, there's no more cars. But in that situation, it's not fair because they can't control the walk-ons. So because they can't control that, it's now my opinion that walk-on passenger-only traffic has become their responsibility because their system's breaking down. They're not following their own stated method of operation because they can't control it.
Yeah.
So if that's breaking down, then I think it does become the responsibility to help fix the problem, and whether that's getting a water taxi going.
Yeah.
Or something else, build us a terminal.
Yeah, that argument makes a little sense.
I'm sticking with it.
And part of the problem is they don't see themselves as being a passenger ferry service. They see themselves as being a car ferry with passengers that go along. So, yeah, I think that'd be great to get that cleared up.
Okay. Okay, 5.3. Strategic Plan 2024 update. Is this?
Oh, it's this council update. The strategic plan has been adopted, so I just included in there the transportation part of the strategic plan. For your
So those are the
reference.
3 points that are part of
That's
the
what's
focus
part
on the public transit. So I think that's why Tim and Andrew were off to engage with TransLink.
Liam.
And sorry, Liz Liam.
And on that front and on this letter, I guess part of what I was wondering is we want to have a focused message here. And so it doesn't really make sense that, you know, you're doing stuff with BC Ferries and we're talking about stuff here, and then a few of us are going over and talking to TransLink. And that, again, I think this is where it comes back to maybe the grant and the planning is a vehicle to get us, you know, get all the issues on the same page. And, you know, advocate for the electric ferry and passenger ferry service. Well, that's part of what you're doing with the water taxi addition in overload situations, which is number 3, right?
There's also the green ferry.
Yeah, but that's mentioned, the electric passenger ferry.
Sorry.
And yeah, we haven't heard anything about that for quite some time, so I don't know where that's going. Patrick, have you heard anything about that?
I haven't, no, sure.
So I think there's some synergy here, where how all this is kind of contributing to, we're having a lot of conversations that need to be centralized somehow into a stream that can make decisions.
Yeah, I'd agree.
So I don't know if we need another recommendation, well, should we specifically include these items?
I think like a problem statement is the first step to all these conversations. So whether it's for item 4 or item 5, like this group should probably put this down as a problem statement and then decide where to send it. I think we've kind of covered, did we make ourselves an action item for 4.1 or we just tabled the topic? But
What was it? I don't have
To-
an plan for that.
to start developing a problem
problem
statement. I mean, this has been the same conversation since pre-COVID.
Yeah.
That there's no master plan for Bowen. Nobody sees this as being their responsibility. So I think the first baby step is we just put that down as a problem. Like, what is the problem? We get that identified, and then start.
It's been in there, like it's in the mission. If you look at the beginning of the transportation plan, create an efficient and sustainable transportation system for the island by integrating planning for multiple modes of transportation, land use, and demand management. So, you know, that's what we want to do. We haven't been able to move that beyond all these multiple conversations.
I mean, there's
Well-
one, sorry, John.
Yeah, to some extent, we haven't been able to move it beyond that is because there's a serious uncontrollable factor across the other side of the water. We can, we can handle things on this end to some extent, but without cooperation, coordination with TransLink with BC Ferries, we don't have a plan to, and that's the biggest issue in the plan.
But yeah, $50,000 of planning might get us moving in the right direction.
Yeah, it might.
The other part of this conversation that's happening on a greater scale is the provinces, what do they call it? There's a large vision, they call it a visioning exercise or an effort to establish what the BC Ferries system should be. And I can't remember the trendy title for it right now, but it started last summer, and they're doing engagement sessions with different groups to try and identify what direction and where the priorities are for the ferry service. And I don't know how they choose their participants. I participated as part of the Ferry Advisory Committee. But a lot of what they're talking about is what is an acceptable level of service, what is important, and that kind of thing. And they're trying to package this information and hand it to the province to help them redefine what the ferry service should be. But we don't have a scaled voice in that. Like we are participating through different stakeholder groups, but there's no specific place there where they listen to the Bowen Island. So having your own little problem statement and plan that you can hand to the province is probably useful.
Well, I think the problem statement could come out of that mission statement. It seems it hits everything.
It hits everything, but a problem, like anytime if you're a consultant and you're handed something to do, the first thing you do is look at what the requirements are.
What's the problem?
What exactly, but not in a vague, airy-fairy way. Like what exactly are the measurable bullet points I need to answer? And then you go on your merry way and you gather your data, you make your models, you do whatever you need to do to answer the bullet points. If it's some like really vague request for better, you have no idea what you're going to get. Like they're not going to go and describe like what is the problem that you want solved. Like if you can do that with even a little bit of accuracy, like these are the things that break down. How do you make that better? Then at least when they're doing their work, they're going to say, okay, well, does what we've suggested or will what we've suggested make the problem statement go away? And I think our mission statement is in that field of too general. That's not enough for anybody to act on.
Right.
And it's not measurable. So it doesn't get solved. Whereas there are things like if you don't just say Bowen needs more ferries or better ferry service, there are very specific breakdowns that are happening. Like one is capacity, two is timeliness, and then three is connections. Like if you can't drive on the ferry, you need another option because we don't have the money or the ability to get another ferry. If you can't get on that, you need the transit to work. So you need frequency and connections and timeliness to work. And that's not there either. So I think like this committee or a subgroup or Bowen Islanders, like we do have the ability to narrow that down and say, like, this is the really big problem. This is what everyone rants about on Facebook is coming from this core breakdown of of transportation and then say, okay, consultant, how will you fix this? Which way should we move? Do we need a water taxi? Do we need a bus? Do we need a helicopter? Like, what is the way that we fix this? And then iron it out. And it could be wrong. Like, it doesn't mean it's going to be perfect, but at least it's like a well focused plan.
So we need that, I would think we need that problem statement to be part of the application.
I think so.
So then we gotta ask ourselves, okay, how do we create that problem statement? Because I think all the pieces of it we're hearing about all the time, but it, you know, it needs to be consolidated into a document.
I agree. So how do we propose to take the next step?
Exactly.
Do you guys want to do a little subcommittee chat? Tyler
Yeah.
and counselors crafting a
Yeah.
work
I can find availability.
with you?
Mm-hmm.
With you?
I mean, would it help to have Bowen Transportation Society in there too? I mean,
No, I don't think so. And I think that it goes back to like the moment you start envisioning what the answer is, you're going to guide away from an unbiased look at the problem. So if what we're saying, because the bus part of it has actually changed since BTS first came up. Like one of the problems from my last conversation with BTS was competition with the blue bus. It's subsidized and the frequency has gone up. And so ridership interest hasn't been high enough to get them to take that next step to move forward. Whereas the water taxi was getting enough ridership, at least in the summer, to go as far as I understood. So by including them in that problem statement, I don't know that's best.
So if we do the same thing with them that we're doing with ourselves and limit it to a conversation about what the problem is, I think they've got a pretty good perspective, one perspective, and I think we need all those perspectives. So it's not about the bus or the water taxi, it's about them telling us their problems, who their members are, what their issues are.
Maybe. I mean, Green Line has another take on it where they think that the next step in solving the problem is a passenger ferry.
Right.
And BC Ferries has their take on what the problem is. And every single person who uses the ferry has their take on what the problem is. But I think that's what you want the consultant to do, right? You want them to flush out the details, gather the data, and propose the solution. I think our conversation should be just, what do we see the problem as? And if anything, making it an open conversation with members of the public might be fruitful, but I don't know if we have the resources with a couple of.
We don't have, we're not talking about a large public engagement strategy here.
So we want the consultant to source that information, and a lot of it must exist already from all the conversations that have happened over the years. So I think you just keep it really simple.
Part of the funding could be for public engagement.
Yeah.
Part of your scope of services could be to work with that and, you know, from that engagement to a problem definition that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Doesn't necessarily have to be done in advance.
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing is, how about a small group, small nimble group to, you know, towards the problem statement.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. I think it'll start developing fairly quick once you start trying to just make simple statements that you know to be true. It doesn't need to have any solution.
No.
So I think we can at least get the first draft out there. Okay. You gonna commit to discussing before the next meeting in 3 weeks?
Okay.
Discussing before the meeting or bring something to the meeting,
Well, they're both one and the same and
maybe. Another meeting before the meeting, as opposed to just doing work and circulating some ideas.
sure.
Well, rather than everybody coming up with ideas, I mean, you summarized it pretty well there.
Yeah,
And could you put together like a bullet point sheet? And then we could sit down and talk about that. See if there's any,
yeah, just give me a date that I have to talk to you about it and I'll do it right before. Yeah, I'll do it.
Yeah.
You give me a time and date that I need to have it done by.
well, how about 10 days from now? And then we meet in 10 days and we've got a little time to work on it for the next meeting. Is the next meeting 3 weeks from now?
It's like the 20 something next month.
The next meeting is on June 25th, Tuesday. So that would be 4 weeks, isn't it?
Yeah.
So you want to say 10 days from now, you have a quick review of a possible problem statement?
Maybe we can say 2 weeks because we got 4 weeks.
Okay, so that would be June 9th. Um,
So I'll start June 8th.
Do you want me to book the room for you guys?
I think the idea was the email or
Oh,
something. It's fine.
John, you want to be involved?
Yeah,
So if John's going to be involved, we should definitely do it either online or email.
Okay, well,
I'm not saying you'd never hear John.
my deadline for June 9th will be to send the email. And if you guys want to get together to talk about it on Zoom or whatever in the following days, then we'll schedule it at that time.
Okay.
June 9th is a Sunday.
what am I looking at? Yeah, that's.
Well, that's just the day I'm sending the email, so.
No, but there is something weird about, okay,
All right.
May 28th, 1 to June,
It doesn't really line up with 2 weeks.
doesn't matter, okay, Sunday's probably better for you. Who wants to be enjoying your family on Sunday?
Well, what we should do is now set the date for the meeting, not set the date once we get your stuff. So if you're sending by June, so June 10th is a Monday.
Yes.
That's your council day. And then Judy's on the joint management committee on the Tuesday, and then maybe on the Wednesday. Meet on Zoom.
Wednesday?
I won't be available on the Wednesday. Not the 12th.
So setting up a meeting is the hardest part. I would circulate it and then if we,
Yeah.
and do a little work during the meeting.
Okay.
I'd lean that way as well.
So there's a BIMTAC meeting scheduled for the 25th. Right?
Yeah.
So let's use that as some working time.
Tim and Tyler could talk about it if they want to.
Yeah.
Good luck. I'll send you guys your individual emails so you're clear on that.
All right.
I'm just reading through the transportation plan and it's pretty aspirational and vague, so, I'm not sure how we're gonna be able to cherry pick from this. And if it has to be referred to in this funding proposal, then we have to go through and highlight parts that we might be able to use as well, so.
Well, I don't think, it's right, it's aspirational and what we're looking for is specifics.
Yeah.
What are the specific problems here?
Yeah.
And getting a list of those,
Yeah.
so. I'm not suggesting we can pull up.
We're gonna need this at some point, but I don't, think we're gonna be able to use it right now.
Okay. Moving on. Item 6, new business. I don't think we have anything here.
Well,
And then we just have information items. We have the strategic plan. Transit on demand pilot pilot report. And then, question period, to new members of the public. We have next meeting on June 25th at 6 p.m.
Oh, yeah, it's right there.
and we are all done.
Thank you.
Second.
John, goodbye. Drew, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Did we adjourn? I didn't even hear that.
Yeah.
Judy, sorry she beat you to it.
Bit of a surprise that Judy would do that. All right, thanks.
Have a good
Bye.